Global alliances are often tested not in times of peace, but in moments of sudden crisis. In the case of Iran and Russia, what appeared to be a strategic partnership revealed itself as fragile and conditional. For years, Tehran had cultivated Moscow as an ally, seeking advanced military technology, diplomatic cover, and economic collaboration. Russia, meanwhile, recognized the utility of Iran's regional influence and its role as a counterweight to Western dominance. Yet beneath these mutual benefits lay unspoken limitations. Russia's commitment was political and strategic, not necessarily military. By early 2026, tensions in the Middle East had reached a boiling point. Iran's growing nuclear capabilities, combined with its support for proxy networks across the region, alarmed both the United States and Israel. Washington and Tel Aviv viewed these developments as direct threats to regional stability and their strategic interests. Iran's political leadership, confident in the strength of its alliance with Russia, believed it had a shield against external attack. That assumption would soon prove dangerously flawed. Moscow had long positioned itself as a defender of multipolarity in global politics, often criticizing Western interventionism. Yet the Kremlin was simultaneously constrained by ongoing military commitments in Eastern Europe, economic pressures from sanctions, and the limits of its conventional power projection. While publicly endorsing Iran's sovereignty and condemning Western interference, Russia lacked the capacity to intervene decisively should a conflict erupt. These constraints were neither secret nor sudden. Analysts had predicted that any direct confrontation between Russia and U.S.-Israeli forces over Iranian territory would be improbable. Iran, on its part, had invested heavily in military infrastructure, missile technology, and drone programs. Its leaders assumed that strategic deterrence and political alliances would protect them from large-scale attacks. The Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty between Moscow and Tehran reinforced this belief, given the impression of a robust mutual defense commitment. In reality, the treaty contained no obligations that could compel Russia to respond militarily in the event of an all-out assault. The misalignment between expectation and reality created a dangerous vulnerability, leaving Iran exposed at a critical juncture. As regional tensions escalated, the global community watched closely. Analysts debated the true strength of the Iran-Russia alliance, with many noting that shared interests alone could not substitute for actionable support. Moscow's approach reflected a calculated balancing act, expressing solidarity while avoiding direct confrontation with powers far superior in technological and logistical capabilities. In this precarious environment, Iran's confidence in Russian protection would soon collide with the harsh realities of modern geopolitical power. The consequences of this imbalance would become immediate and irreversible in the days that followed. The escalation came suddenly. In late February 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces executed a coordinated series of strikes against Iranian targets, hitting military facilities, missile depots, and key leadership centers. The operation was swift and precise, designed to degrade Iran's capacity to project power and to disrupt ongoing nuclear development. Intelligence agencies reported high-value targets eliminated in the opening hours, sending shockwaves through Tehran's political and military hierarchy. The message from Washington and Tel Aviv was unmistakable. The consequences of Iran's regional ambitions would no longer be tolerated. Iran's defense systems struggled to respond effectively. Missile batteries fired in rapid succession, but the scale and coordination of the attack overwhelmed existing capabilities. Command and control infrastructure sustained heavy damage, limiting the ability of local commanders to coordinate counterattacks. Within hours, Tehran's military network was destabilized, exposing the nation's vulnerabilities to both internal and external observers. Analysts immediately highlighted the contrast between Iran's regional assertiveness and its limited capacity to withstand a concentrated assault by technologically superior forces. The political impact was immediate and severe. Iran's leadership, previously confident in its regional leverage and alliances, faced an unprecedented crisis. Strategic calculations that had relied on Russian support were thrown into doubt. Public statements emphasized national resilience and vowed retaliation, but the reality on the ground revealed a leadership grappling with disrupted communications, damaged infrastructure, and a population facing the uncertainty of escalating attacks. Internal divisions between hardliners and pragmatists began to surface, complicating decision-making under pressure. International reactions were swift. Neighboring states condemned the violence, but expressed concern over the destabilizing effects on regional security and global trade, particularly the flow of energy through the Strait of Hormuz. The operation demonstrated the capacity of U.S.-Israeli military collaboration to project power deep into the Middle East, while highlighting the limits of regional alliances that could not match this level of technological and strategic reach. Moscow's public condemnation of the strikes contrasted sharply with its absence on the battlefield, reinforcing perceptions of its inability or unwillingness to act militarily in support of Tehran. The event also signaled a broader shift in regional calculations. Nations that had previously relied on the deterrent effect of Iranian alliances began reassessing their own security strategies. The scale and precision of the strikes suggested that conventional military dominance could decisively alter outcomes regardless of long-standing diplomatic or strategic partnerships. For Iran, the operation was a stark reminder that alliances, no matter how politically convenient, could not substitute for independent defensive capability. The ramifications of this confrontation would shape Middle Eastern geopolitics for years, redefining assumptions about strength, vulnerability, and the limits of external support. The attacks exposed a critical dilemma for Russia. Despite its rhetoric condemning U.S. and Israeli actions, Moscow faced hard limits in its ability to provide meaningful assistance to Iran. Military intervention risked direct confrontation with technologically superior forces, potential escalation in multiple theaters, and severe economic repercussions. Russia's ongoing commitments in Ukraine and elsewhere consumed resources and attention, leaving the Kremlin with few viable options to intervene without jeopardizing its broader strategic position. Political solidarity existed, but operational support was beyond Russia's capacity. This reality reshaped perceptions of Russian influence. For decades, Moscow had projected power through selective military engagements, leveraging alliances to amplify its reach without overextending itself. In Iran's crisis, however, the gap between capability and commitment became apparent. Russian statements of support could not prevent the degradation of Iranian military infrastructure, nor could they shield leadership figures from targeted strikes. Analysts highlighted that the illusion of a dependable alliance could no longer be sustained in the face of immediate, high-intensity military pressure. Iranian leaders quickly recognized the limitations of their partnerships. Reliance on Moscow for military backup proved insufficient, forcing the regime to adapt rapidly to the operational reality on the ground. Decision-making became constrained by damaged infrastructure, disrupted communications, and the urgent need to protect critical assets. Strategic priorities shifted from external engagement to internal consolidation, emphasizing survival over expansion or retaliation. The mismatch between perceived security guarantees and actual support underscored the risks of overestimating external alliances in modern conflict. The crisis also revealed the broader implications for global geopolitics. Countries worldwide observed how Russia, often portrayed as a counterweight to Western power, was restrained by its own operational limitations. The inability to act decisively on behalf of an ally demonstrated that influence alone cannot substitute for capability. U.S. and Israeli actions illustrated the decisive effect of advanced military coordination, strategic intelligence, and technological superiority in shaping outcomes, reinforcing the reality that regional dominance depends on more than ideological alignment or diplomatic posturing. In Tehran, the impact was immediate and profound. Internal debates intensified over how to respond, whether to escalate, negotiate, or recalibrate long-term strategy. Public confidence was shaken, and hardline narratives of invincibility were undermined. For Russia, the situation served as a cautionary example of the gap between rhetoric and actionable power. Globally, the crisis highlighted a shifting paradigm. Alliances are only effective when backed by the ability to enforce commitments. Without practical capability, partnerships risk becoming symbolic, leaving nations exposed to decisive external action. The lessons of this moment would resonate far beyond the region, shaping military strategy, diplomacy, and perceptions of power for years to come. The aftermath of the strikes reshaped the regional and global balance of power. Iran, weakened by precise attacks and the loss of key infrastructure, faced a crisis of survival. Its leadership, forced to confront the limits of its alliances, began reassessing strategic priorities, shifting focus from expansion to defense and internal stability. Pragmatists and hardliners debated the nation's next steps, weighing the risks of retaliation against the urgent need to secure resources and maintain control over its population. The operation exposed vulnerabilities that could not be offset by rhetoric or symbolic partnerships. Russia emerged as a cautionary example of restrained power. Its inability to intervene effectively reinforced the reality that alliances depend on actionable support, not merely shared ideology or mutual statements of solidarity. Moscow maintained influence through diplomacy and strategic positioning, but the contrast between its global ambitions and operational limitations was stark. Analysts emphasized that nations projecting strength without the means to act risk undermining credibility and leaving partners exposed in moments of crisis. The perception of power had shifted, highlighting the difference between symbolic alliances and practical capability. For the United States and Israel, the strikes demonstrated the decisive effect of superior intelligence, advanced weaponry, and coordinated strategy. Their ability to disrupt Iran's military capacity without triggering a wider global conflict underscored the effectiveness of targeted, high-precision operations. The outcome sent a clear signal to other nations pursuing regional dominance. Technological superiority and strategic foresight could outweigh numbers or ideological alignment. The demonstration of capability also reshaped calculations across the Middle East, forcing neighboring states to reevaluate alliances, defense readiness, and contingency planning. The broader implications extended beyond the immediate region. Global powers observed how strategic leverage depended on the combination of military capability, political will, and operational readiness. Symbolic support, even from influential allies, could not compensate for the absence of tangible intervention. The events highlighted a new paradigm in international relations, where rapid, precise action by technologically advanced states could alter outcomes and redefine regional hierarchies. Alliances without enforceable commitments became precarious, leaving partners vulnerable to decisive external action. Ultimately, the crisis marked a turning point in geopolitical thinking. Iran's vulnerability, Russia's constraints, and the demonstrated strength of U.S.-Israeli coordination illustrated the evolving rules of power. Nations were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Alliances must be backed by capability, deterrence requires readiness, and strategic calculations must account for real-world limitations. The conflict left an indelible mark on international relations, reshaping perceptions of strength, exposing weaknesses, and redefining the balance of power for the foreseeable future.